Alright, so I know I'm a little late to the party considering the latest book in the Starless Clan arc, Sky, came out in November of last year, and at the time of recording this video, Shadow is set to come out in less than a month. But ever since reading Sky, I've had this nagging thought in the back of my head that I figured I'd finally just get out into the open. Quick disclaimer, I did a little Google search before recording this to see if anyone else already talked about it, and I couldn't find anything, but that doesn't mean nobody has. So if anyone else got to this before me, kudos to you. Okay, so a lot of fans have been frustrated lately that this arc seems to be following a pretty similar protagonist formula to that of A Broken Code. You have your three protagonists from different clans, a medicine cat apprentice with an impaired connection to StarClan, a Tom who doesn't fit in with his peers due to his heritage, and a she-cat who has feelings for a Tom in her own clan, but after being rejected by him, goes for the younger Tom from the other clan instead, even though he seems way too immature for her. So yeah, it definitely seems like the writing team is kind of just rehashing the characters and relationship dynamics from the previous arc, but what does any of this have to do with Nightheart being a foil to Firestar? Well, simply put, I think, or at least I like to think, that it's all a ploy, a red herring if you will. At the end of Sky, we see Nightheart leave ThunderClan to join ShadowClan and be with Sunbeam, but even though he likes the idea of having a mate who will encourage and support him, she's never the center of his focus, and that's because Nightheart doesn't really want a mate, at least not at the heart of things. He just wants to fit in. He wants to be respected and accepted for who he is, not for who his ancestors were. He wants clanmates who will treat him as an equal and recognize his true potential. He wants someone who will understand him, and so far the only cat who's done that, at least in a way that's up to his standards, is Sunbeam. His hope is that by becoming her mate and joining her clan, he'll finally get the respect and recognition he deserves, not just from her, but from her clanmates as well. After all, if Sunbeam is respected by her clanmates, and he's Sunbeam's mate, then surely they would have to respect him too, right? Now, all this isn't to say that Nightheart doesn't actually care for Sunbeam or that he's using her. Or at least, he's probably not consciously using her or doing so with any malicious intent. The two do seem to have a genuine connection and care for each other, but maybe it's just me, but these two don't really read as love interests to me, especially not from Nightheart's perspective. There are a couple lines where Sunbeam thinks to herself how handsome Nightheart is and how glossy his stark black fur is, and I'll bet you $5 there's one where she thinks how broad his shoulders are. But at least as far as I can remember, Nightheart never really thinks of Sunbeam in this way. He's almost always thinking of her as a friend, as the one cat who understands him, the one cat he doesn't have to prove himself to, and he only ever considers the idea of becoming mates with her when he realizes it could serve as an acceptable reason for him to leave ThunderClan, something he was already thinking about doing. We see this multiple times throughout Sky when he remarks to Jay further that he might do better in another clan or even outside the clans altogether, and then again when he asks his traveling companions on the journey to find Catmint if they think there will ever be other reasons that a cat could be allowed to switch clans aside from mating with a cat in that clan. Being mates with Sunbeam is not Nightheart's end goal in and of itself, but rather a means to an end that doubles as a mutually beneficial relationship for them both. Even in Sunbeam's case, even though she is thinking of Nightheart as being physically attractive in a more stereotypically romantic way, it feels more like she's rebounding than anything else. Like I said, I do think the relationship is based on genuine friendship and connection, but I don't think it's based on a genuine desire to be mates. Rather, it seems to be serving more as a distraction and escape from their problems. For Nightheart, it's a literal escape from his clan, and for Sunbeam, it's a figurative escape from her relationship problems with Blazefire and Lightleap. And I just want to say that in Nightheart's defense, if I felt ostracized from my entire community and only had one person outside that community who I felt truly understood me and liked me for me, then yeah, I'd probably want to leave everything behind to be with that person too, whether I had romantic feelings for them or not. But he isn't leaving just to be with her. He's leaving because he thinks ShadowClan is going to be the place where he finally finds acceptance. And what we as readers already know is that ShadowClan is not going to be all Nightheart is hoping for. The blurb for Shadow confirms this when it says, quote, ShadowClan's newest arrival feels increasingly unwelcome, and even though ShadowClan warrior Sunbeam thinks every cat deserves a chance, one of the loudest voices of opposition is her own mother. Hey, future Southmouth here. So the excerpt for Shadow came out literally as I was recording this, and it basically confirmed everything I just said about Nightheart, kind of just using his love for Sunbeam as an excuse to join ShadowClan, and she actually wonders if this is the case, but ends up giving him the benefit of the doubt. Nightheart is also a lot more vocal about his feelings for her in this, although this is very obviously just to convince her clanmates that they're madly in love, while Sunbeam is now more uncertain and tells him she doesn't even know if she wants a mate. So, yeah. Anyway, back to Past Self. Despite Sunbeam previously telling Nightheart how Fringe Whisker has been criticized and discriminated against ever since she joined ShadowClan, it never seems to cross Nightheart's mind that he might receive the same treatment. Now granted, he's probably not going to be constantly compared to Firestar in ShadowClan, but he's still going to be compared to quote-unquote true ShadowClan warriors, and most likely conspired against by Berryheart and her posse in the same way Fringe Whisker has been. And judging by how desperate and impatient Nightheart has been to be accepted, I just can't imagine him staying in another clan that doesn't respect him for very long, even with Sunbeam. But where else would he go? Back to ThunderClan? Maybe, but I kinda doubt it. He has no reason to go to WindClan or SkyClan, and that's where we come to our next three options. Option number 1, RiverClan. So, there's this semi-popular theory going around right now that Nightheart is going to be the next leader of RiverClan. The main reason for this is that RiverClan's new leader has to be someone that's not an immediately obvious choice. And now that Nightheart is in ShadowClan and ShadowClan is about to take over RiverClan, this will lead to him getting at least somewhat involved with RiverClan and getting to know Frostpaw. And I just gotta be honest with you guys, I'm really not a big fan of this one. I think Nightheart is way too immature and just not a leaderly type, and that aside, I don't think it would do his character arc any favors. Nightheart's entire arc is about how much he's compared to Firestar and how much he utterly hates it. Even going back to Darkness Within, Nightheart, then Flamepaw, overhears Thornclaw angrily challenge Lionblaze about the apparent Firestar nepotism that's been going on in ThunderClan. Thornclaw points out that only cats who had some close relation to Firestar have been made leader or deputy since the Ginger Tom's death, and sarcastically asks if Flamepaw or Sparkpaw will be next. This sparks the beginning of Nightheart's bitterness towards his heritage and his journey to prove his own merits. So I really don't think it would be a good look for him or the series as a whole if Thornclaw ends up being right about him becoming leader. I mean, no, he wouldn't be leader of ThunderClan, but becoming leader of an entirely different clan that he has no prior connection to is almost worse. Not only would it draw even more comparisons between him and Firestar, and be an overall more Firestar-esque accomplishment, similar to how Firestar became leader of a group that he originally had no connection to, but it would also kind of imply that no one in RiverClan was qualified, that RiverClan needed a ThunderClan-born cat, an extremely young and inexperienced one at that, to come and save them because not a single one of their much older, more experienced warriors was good enough. And just imagine the kind of unwanted attention Nightheart would receive for this. On one hand, you'd have your Thornclaws saying, "Oh, of course, Firestar's kin became leader of RiverClan. Now Firestar's bloodline can just take over all the clans." As well as your cats from other clans saying, "Oh, of course a ThunderClan cat had to take over RiverClan. Why does ThunderClan always have to meddle and stick their noses in every other clan's business, etc., etc.?" And on the other hand, you'd have Nightheart's family saying, "Oh, Nightstar, I always knew you'd do great things. You are a descendant of Firestar after all. Leadership runs in your blood." I think I rest my case here. Option number 2, New Clan. This next theory I haven't heard as much about as the Nightheart becomes leader of RiverClan one, but it is an interesting idea, so I thought I'd go over it anyway. Now, obviously, you have the first 5 books of this arc being named after the 5 clans, River, Sky, Shadow, Thunder, and Wind respectively, and most people are expecting the 6th book to be named Star, after StarClan. However, I heard some speculation that this arc is going to introduce a new 6th clan into the mix, and that the 6th book is going to be named after this new clan. This clan would be the Starless clan in question, and would probably be made up of outcasts from the other 5 clans. Cats who either don't believe as strongly or at all in StarClan or in the Warrior Code, or at least more open to changes to the code. Even though changes have already been made, maybe this clan will be even more lenient. Maybe its members are allowed to eat Tuluk food, or maybe medicine cats can have mates, who knows. I even had a fun little idea about what this clan could be called. Given that it would most likely be a conglomeration of cats from all different clans, maybe they'd call it Storm Clan or something like that. I mean, think about it. Thunder and wind are both pretty much a given in a storm. The sky is where the storm happens, and if you really want to stretch it, you could even argue that river equals water/rain and shadow equals darkness/dark clouds. But like I said, that is kind of stretching it. This new clan would also almost definitely have Nightheart, a former ThunderClan cat, as its leader/founder, and what usually precedes a storm? Thunder. And honestly, when I put it like that, it does sound like a pretty fun idea, but there are still a couple of major issues with it. Firstly, as I just said, Nightheart would pretty much be guaranteed to be the leader of this new clan as well, and that would present most of the same issues as it would with him being leader of any other clan. And secondly, there's literally no room for another clan in these territories. The clans already had to give up parts of their territory in order to make room for Sky Clan, and they were very begrudging about that. Even though Sky Clan was one of the original 5 and was rightfully owed a place in the Lake territories after being forcefully driven out of their home generations ago, I highly doubt that the clans would agree to give up even more of their territory now in order to accommodate this brand new clan made up of their former clanmates who just chose to leave, just because they want to do things differently. Plus, how many cats are really going to leave the security of their eons-old clans in order to join this new baby one that might not even work out? I guess they could recruit some loners or kitty pets, but then that would kind of just feel like an unnecessary rehashing of the Sky Clan revival plot from Firestar's quest, and I just don't think introducing a new clan into this current timeline would work, especially not as a resolution to Nightheart's arc. Remember, Nightheart's goal is to be recognized as his own cat with his own merit, not as an extension of Firestar, and whichever way you look at it, attaining a position of power in any clan, be it an already existing one or a brand new one, is only going to cause cats to liken him to Firestar even more than they already do and make his heritage the center of attention, in both positive and negative lights. And that's the opposite of what Nightheart wants. He doesn't want or need to achieve some great Firestar-esque feat like becoming leader or founding his very own clan. He needs to distance himself from Firestar. He needs to be a foil to Firestar. Now, admittedly, Nightheart's article on the official Warriors website, titled Nightheart and the Burden of Legacy, does try to draw comparisons between him and Firestar. It says that, quote, he possesses some of Firestar's best qualities, bravery, a sense of justice, a good heart, but in a kind of nighttime version that is quieter and more self-doubting, and that he is clever, resourceful, if a bit rash, a good hunter, and ultimately a kind-hearted cat who is eager to make his mark. And, sure, I guess. Personally, I think these are all kind of just generic protagonist traits, but maybe we'll get to see more of them in later books. But the part that I thought was most interesting was the very last sentence in this article. Quote, "For the record, we never expected him to follow in Firestar's footsteps, but we believe that in time, Nightheart will prove to be legendary in his own right." Attaining a position of power is probably the biggest and most in-your-face way Nightheart could follow in Firestar's footsteps, so needless to say, this line has put me at ease for now. But this begs the question. If Nightheart doesn't stay in ShadowClan, doesn't go back to ThunderClan, doesn't join RiverClan, WindClan, or SkyClan, and doesn't start a brand new clan, where does that leave him? Well, that brings us to option number 3, outside the clans. Think about it. Although it was brief, Nightheart did mention leaving the clans altogether to become a loner, and on the journey to find Catmint, he was the one who suggested stealing Tulip food and one of the only cats who saw nothing wrong with it, something that the cats traveling with him took issue with because it went against the code. Nightheart also has a pretty blasé attitude towards the warrior code and clan life in general. He doesn't particularly care one way or another about important clan issues like deposing leaders or switching clans, or at least he didn't care about switching clans until he realized it could benefit him, and he doesn't seem to take pride in being a clan cat at all, much less a ThunderClan cat. On the contrary, he finds it silly how every clan seems to think they're the best. He's detached and disconnected from clan culture in a way that past protagonists, even edgy ones like Jayfeather, haven't been. Nightheart also has an interesting view on the warrior code that I want to talk about. On the journey to find Catmint, the cats talk briefly about kitty pets, and Nightheart remarks how he could never follow their rules. Sunbeam points out that he doesn't mind following the warrior code, and he responds with, "Of course not, we decide the code for ourselves." When Fidgetflick argues that StarClan decides the code, Nightheart says this is true, but that, quote, "they let us change it if we want." It's pretty evident from this that Nightheart views the code as subject to the clan cats, not the other way around. It's not a set of rules imposed on them by StarClan, it's a set of rules decided by them and easily approved by StarClan, at least in Nightheart's eyes. That's why he doesn't have a problem following it. At this point in his life, he believes that he's most free to do what he wants as a clan cat. But what happens if he starts to feel more constricted by the code and clan life? What happens if he discovers a more liberating way of life? Also, despite initially wondering how any cat could live under two-leg rule, only a few pages later, Nightheart actually meets kitty pets for the first time and can't help but admire how brave they are. Foreshadowing? Maybe, maybe not, but I just thought it was worth noting. Now, just to be clear, I don't think that Nightheart becoming a kitty pet specifically is super likely to happen, even though it would make him the literal perfect foil to Firestar. I mean, just imagine, you have a Rusty, a kitty pet, who joins a clan of wildcats, proves himself time and time again to them, exceeds everyone's expectations by becoming leader of the clan and saving them from some of the biggest threats the clans as a whole have ever faced, uniting the core 4 clans and reviving the long-dead 5th, and becomes this legendary figure who is pretty much known as the greatest cat to ever live. And then a few generations later, his descendant just up and leaves the life he fought so hard for, only to go back to the soft, less honorable life his great-grandfather left behind. The rest of Nightheart's kin would no doubt view this as a slap in the face. To them, there could be no bigger insult, no worse way to disrespect Firestar's legacy. But in a way, it would be kind of poetic and almost reminiscent of Firestar himself. After all, to Rusty's peers, he no doubt would have been making an awful decision, leaving the safety of his home and 2 legs behind to go and live as what they think is a savage, bloodthirsty wildcat with no honor. And to Nightheart's peers, he'd also be making an awful decision, leaving the safety of his clan and family behind to go and live as what they think is a soft, weak kitty pet with no honor. In both cases, these Toms have to follow their own hearts and choose a life that their family and friends strongly disapprove of, but that they ultimately know is right for them. Now, there is one last elephant in the room I need to address. Sunbeam. What about her? She's arguably the most important cat in Nightheart's life right now. Would he really leave her behind? For that matter, would he really leave his family behind? As much bad blood as there was between them, they are still family. At least if he was in another clan, he'd still see them at gatherings, but leaving the clans entirely is a whole other thing. But somehow, I think that even if Nightheart does end up leaving the clans, it won't be the last we ever see of him. He'd most likely still live within visiting distance, and who knows, maybe Sunbeam would even go with him. She was the only cat to help him steal 2-leg food after all, so she clearly isn't a stickler for clan rules like some other cats are. Like I said, I'm not sure I could envision the Errands actually making Nightheart into a kitty pet, but I'd honestly be happy if he just became a loner. I mean, think about it. We haven't really had a memorable cat willingly choose to leave the clans in a long time, and we've never had a POV character in the main series do so. There were some forgettable background characters who left the clans the past few arcs, like Flywhisker, Rippletail, Parsley Seed. Yeah, remember those guys? But the last book where a truly memorable and important character left the clans entirely was Blue Star's Prophecy in 2009, in which Pine Star left ThunderClan. And the last main character chronologically to leave the clans was Ravenpaw in Into the Wild, all the way back in 2003. We are long overdue for a main character, not some random replaceable background character, to decide that clan life isn't for them. And thematically, there is no better cat for the job than Nightheart. You could even say that Nightheart leaving behind the great Firestar's legacy for the humble life of a kitty pet or loner would make him legendary in his own right. But who knows, maybe I'm totally wrong about everything here. Maybe Nightheart will wind up leader of River Clan or some new clan. Maybe he'll discover his place is in ThunderClan after all, or maybe he'll just end up staying in ShadowClan with Sunbeam and they'll have a litter of kids together and get to live the happily ever after that Bristlefrost and Rootspring never got to. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Until next time, see ya.